The floodwaters of Pine Creek churned like liquid thunder, swollen from spring rains that showed no mercy. 8-year-old Emily Richardson stood at the edge of the chaos, her red raincoat soaked through her small figure, motionless but intent. Across the raging current, a German shepherd puppy whimpered from a shrinking mound of mud and debris, its eyes locked on Emily's. Her boots squelched as she stepped into the cold, her breath sharp in the misty air. The creek was no longer a place to play or skip stones. It had become a force indifferent and ravenous. But Emily didn't hesitate. Her mother's warnings, her own fear, all vanished beneath a singular urgency. She moved with the quiet resolve of someone who had nothing left to lose, not since the accident that took her father and her voice with it. The icy water bit at her knees, then her waist, but she pressed on. Each step deeper, the current fought her harder, tugging at her coat, her breath, her will. Still her eyes never left the puppy. It trembled violently, paws scrabbling at the edge of its disintegrating perch. Emily whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse, the first word she'd spoken in years. "It's okay. I'm coming." The words vanished into the roar, but they were not for the world, only for the creature whose terror mirrored something deep within her. As the earth beneath the puppy gave way, it plunged into the torrent. Emily lunged her arms, breaking the surface, grabbing desperately. Her fingers found the wet scruff, pulled it close, pressed the weight against her chest. The pup's heart beat wildly against hers. Kicking against the pull of the water, Emily fought for the shore. The puppy had gone quiet, too quiet. Panic fluttered beneath her ribs. Then her foot hit rock, then mud, then solid ground. She stumbled forward, collapsed on her hands and knees, the puppy still in her arms. That's when she saw them. 7 German shepherds, full-grown, motionless, lined along the shore like guardians or judges, their amber eyes unreadable. They made no sound, no movement. They simply watched the girl and the puppy she held. Emily froze, soaked and shivering as the circle of beasts closed in. Emily's breath came in ragged clouds. The dogs stood in a semicircle, a wall of muscle and silence. Their bodies were still, but their eyes told another story. Not wild, not hostile. Something else. Something that made her heart slow and her trembling quiet. The largest dog, broader than the rest, its coat tinged with gray, stepped forward. Water lapped at its paws as it entered the shallows. It didn't growl, didn't bark. Instead, it lowered its head slowly, a bow, so deliberate it seemed almost reverent. From the edge of the trees came the crack of a branch. Emily turned sharply, clutching the puppy tighter. Sheriff Hank Anderson stood just beyond the tree line, one hand hovering near his holster. His eyes widened in disbelief. "Emily," he called softly, "don't move, don't run." But Emily didn't need to. She felt it, the shift. The alpha's eyes met hers, not with threat, but recognition, as if it knew her, understood her, maybe even remembered her. Then came a small, exhausted whimper. The puppy stirred in her arms. The sound rippled through the pack, like wind through leaves. The alpha responded with a low, almost melodic chuff. One by one, the others moved, not in attack, but in formation, surrounding her, protecting her. Emily stood stunned in the middle of a living circle of muscle and fur and breath. Sheriff Anderson lowered his weapon slowly. His voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for the trees. "What in God's name?" Emily didn't notice. She stood still, eyes glistening with tears. not from fear, but from awe. The warmth of the puppy in her arms, the silent unity of the pack, the sudden weight of being seen, truly seen for the first time since her father died. And then she smiled. The kind of smile that doesn't ask permission. The kind born from something ancient older than words. Pine Ridge was the kind of town where wind carried gossip better than any phone call. Tucked against the jagged rise of the Black Ridge Mountains, it held fewer than 3,000 souls, a place where nature ruled with beauty and violence in equal measure, and everyone remembered your business better than you did. 3 years ago, the Richardson family had been woven tightly into that small-town fabric. Michael Richardson, husband, father rescuer, had died in those same mountains, trying to save a stranded hiker. Since that day, Emily hadn't spoken a word. She wasn't mute. She wasn't broken. But she had vanished into herself, retreating into a place where words no longer had meaning. Margaret, her mother, wore grief like armor, strong on the outside, brittle beneath. A wildlife biologist with a specialty in canine behavior, she had relocated to Pine Ridge, hoping the wilderness might bring Emily back. It hadn't. Instead, the town stared. Whispers passed between neighbors like prayers, with bad intentions. Sheriff Anderson watched from a distance. A man carved by the land he protected, pragmatic, stern, wary of outsiders, especially those like Margaret, who brought new ideas and city instincts. And his biggest concern, the pack of wild German shepherds growing bolder in the mountains. No one could agree where they came from. Escaped from old military breeding programs, some said. Others whispered about illegal security dogs gone feral. But to men like Thomas Wilson, a powerful rancher who'd lost livestock, it didn't matter where they came from. They were a threat, and threats had to be put down. At the community meeting, Wilson's voice filled the pine-paneled hall like gunfire. 3 more lambs this week, 11 this month. These aren't strays, they're organized. Margaret stood in the back notebook unopened. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm but insistent. Their patterns don't suggest predation. They're territorial, yes, but they behave more like guardians. The murmurs turned colder. Fear didn't care for nuance. And when Wilson called for a hunting party, mothers clutched their children closer. Emily sat beneath the coat rack, quietly sketching the dogs. She didn't speak, but Margaret knew her daughter heard everything. That night, thunder rolled like distant cannon fire. Rain struck the cabin roof in uneven sheets, and the wind rattled loose boards like warning knocks from some unseen hand. Margaret paced, restless. After tucking Emily into bed and smoothing the girl's damp curls, she hadn't noticed the missing backpack. She hadn't seen the quiet determination in Emily's eyes. Emily was already gone. A red flash through the trees. Boots splashing through puddles, heart set on one thing. The dogs had to be warned. She knew where they would be. She had watched them for months, tracing paw prints in the mud, leaving food on the edge of their hidden world. They were not monsters. They were family, not hers exactly, but something adjacent, something sacred. The forest transformed by the flood pulled at her feet and scraped at her legs. Still, she pressed on, navigating fallen limbs and swollen streams. Somewhere beyond the mist and moss, a life needed saving. When she heard the whimper, high, thin, desperate, it pierced deeper than her bones. The puppy had been separated, alone, trapped, and Emily, who hadn't spoken in years, whispered words meant for no one but the trembling creature. "I'm coming." The town would never understand. Not Wilson with his guns. Not the people at the meeting clutching fear like a shield. Maybe not even her mother, but the dogs did. As Margaret drove home that night, her voice filled the cabin of the car, soft and hopeful. Dr. Crawford says you're making progress. Your drawings, they mean something. Emily stared out the window, her silence a tide too deep for words. Thunder rolled again. Behind them the forest waited, and somewhere beneath the shadows, 7 dogs stood still watching, waiting as one silent girl rewrote everything Pine Ridge believed about danger, grief, and the boundaries between species. Dawn crept across the drenched hills of Pine Ridge like a slow revelation. The storm had passed, but its fingerprints remained uprooted. Trees flooded trails, the air thick with silence and the sharp scent of pine needles and wet earth. Emily moved through the woods as if born to it, her red raincoat slicing through the mist like a flare. Each step was intentional. She wasn't wandering, she was returning. She'd been here before many times in secret. She had watched the German shepherds from afar, noting their behaviors in silence, understanding them in ways even her mother's textbooks could not. The way they moved, the way they took turns guarding the youngest, the way they nuzzled each other during shifts. They weren't wild. They were family. She reached the limestone ridges just as the fog thickened. There was no barking, no growls, only breath and presence. The alpha emerged first, towering, still. Then the others, 7 in total, surrounding her like before. Emily didn't flinch. Instead, she placed the rescued puppy down gently on the wet stone. It shivered, then let out a faint yip. Something in the sound stirred the pack. The alpha moved forward, sniffed the pup. Then it looked at Emily. Not through her, not past her, at her. Connection passed not in words but in stillness. The kind only broken people understand. Behind her, the crunch of boots on gravel. Sheriff Anderson appeared again, slower this time, unsure. His hand still hovered near his holster, but something in his eyes had changed. Emily, you okay? She turned, didn't answer. But her face, usually so pale, so empty, carried something now. Not joy, not fear, something deeper. Peace, wrapped in awe. Around her, the pack closed ranks, not to threaten, to protect. One stepped forward and licked the pup's face. Another lowered its body beside it. The alpha returned to its position, watching not just Emily now, but Anderson too. Something was happening here. Something old and inexplicable. And the man with the badge and the girl with no voice were the only human witnesses. By the time Sheriff Anderson's cruiser pulled into the Richardson driveway at dawn, the world had returned to the quiet hum of aftermath. Fog clung low to the ground. The scent of rain-soaked wood and river silt drifted from the girl bundled in the front seat, pale, wet, silent, but alive. Margaret burst through the door before the engine even stopped. "She's all right?" She called Hart, already halfway down the porch steps. "Cold and wet," Anderson answered. "But different." Emily sat in the passenger seat, wrapped in a silver emergency blanket, a small bundle pressed to her chest. Her lips were tinged with blue, but her eyes, Margaret hadn't seen them like that since before. Alive. She offered the bundle wordlessly. A soaked, shivering German shepherd puppy blinked up at its savior's mother. Inside, warmth and routine took over. Margaret drew a bath. She heated milk. She wrapped the puppy in towels. But nothing she did felt real, not after what Anderson described. It was like they knew her, he said, pacing her living room, hat in hand. 7 of them. surrounding her but not trapping, guarding. The alpha bowed. Margaret sat without speaking, her fingers frozen around a coffee mug. Years of scientific training warred with something primal, rising inside her, the impossible colliding with the undeniable. People will talk, Anderson added, about Emily, about the dogs. Some already think this is unnatural. Complex social behavior in canids is well documented, Margaret replied, voice automatic. Wolves grieve. Dogs recognize emotion. But this, she looked toward the hearth, where Emily lay beneath blankets, shadow curled against her side. This is something else. That night, as Emily's fever crept higher and her breathing grew shallow, the puppy whimpered and nuzzled closer. Margaret never left her daughter's side, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest. At midnight, soft scratching echoed at the porch door. Margaret peered through the curtain and froze. 7 German shepherds stood in the yard unmoving, watching. They did not bark. They did not approach. They simply waited. For 3 nights the pack returned. They came with the moonrise and vanished before dawn, never setting paw on the porch, never breaking their silent vigil. Margaret watched them through slits in the curtains, a scientist's notebook trembling in her hand. 7 forms statues, in the dark breath, steaming in the cold air like signals only her daughter could decode. Inside, Emily battled her fever. Shadow never left her side, not even to eat. When she thrashed in her sleep, the puppy whimpered softly. When she wept in silence, it pressed its warm body against hers, a guardian in miniature echoing the larger protectors waiting outside. Dr. Crawford visited each day. Her expression grew more troubled with each check of Emily's lungs. The stress. It's lodged itself in her body, she murmured to Margaret. Whatever bond she has with those animals, it's real, and it's costing her. On the 4th day, as Emily's fever broke into a sweat-drenched delirium, Margaret felt the house shift. The air grew taut. Something was coming, and it arrived with the crunch of tires in gravel. Thomas Wilson's shotgun, still rattling in its rack, stepped onto the porch like a man facing down a personal demon. This ends now, he growled. They've surrounded your house. They're escalating. Margaret crossed her arms. They're protecting her. They're predators, Wilson spat. And your daughter is in the middle of something no child should be part of. Cross-species altruism exists, Margaret countered. In wolves, in elephants, in dogs. Not like this. As if on cue, Shadow appeared beside her. Hackles raised a low growl, threading the air. Small but fierce. Wilson stepped back. You see that aggression already. That's not aggression, Margaret said. That's warning, but Wilson didn't care. His mind was already made. The hunting party's leaving at dawn, with or without your blessing. And then he left. Inside, Margaret stood shaking, not from fear of the dogs, but from fear of the humans. That night, Emily stirred for the first time in hours. Fever flushed but lucid, she reached for her sketchbook. Her hands worked slowly, deliberately, and when she was done, she held it out to her mother, a map of Pine Ridge, a cluster of hills, and a red X, drawn beneath limestone cliffs. Is this where they stay? Margaret whispered. Emily nodded. Emily turned to a clean page and drew again, this time a stick figure girl, surrounded by 7 dogs' lines, radiating outward like sunlight or unseen threads. Connection, unity, purpose. No words were needed. Margaret stared at it, breath-catching. You're not just watching them, she whispered. You're part of them. Emily didn't smile. She didn't speak. But she looked at her mother with a quiet knowing that Margaret hadn't seen since before Michael died. The next morning, Margaret made 2 calls. First to Dr. Crawford to explain the drawings, then to Sheriff Anderson. "You need to delay the hunting party," she said. "No greeting, no preamble." "Wilson's already mobilizing," Anderson replied. 15 men, some of them drunk on fear. "Then come see for yourself," she said. "Come tonight. They'll return like they have every night. Watch what I've watched. If you still think they're a threat, then I won't stop you." There was a pause on the line, then a sigh. "Fine. But if I'm not convinced, I won't interfere." As dusk fell, the cabin filled with a heavy hush. Emily, now sitting upright with Shadow nestled against her, seemed calmer, not because the danger had passed, but because she understood it in ways the adults didn't. Headlights cut across the window. Anderson arrived. Within minutes, the dogs emerged first as shadows, then as shapes, then as sentinels. They formed their now familiar semicircle just beyond the clearing eyes, fixed on the cabin. The Alpha sat slightly forward, posture regal and unyielding. Watching, Anderson's breath fogged the glass. Every night, he asked. Every night, Margaret said. Never closer, never threatening, just guarding. Before either could say more, Emily appeared in the hallway. Dressed, steady. She stepped forward without hesitation, Shadow at her heels. Margaret's heart seized. Emily, no. But the child's intent was clear. She moved to the door hand on the knob. She wants to go to them, Margaret whispered. She knows they're here for her. Anderson stepped in front of her. Absolutely not. Those are wild animals. Emily met his eyes, quiet and unwavering. Then slowly she walked to her sketchbook and began to draw. Emily's pencil flew across the page cabin, people inside, dogs outside in semicircle formation. But then a new figure emerged on the opposite side, a man with a rifle. Behind him more figures, all armed, all coming. Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. Someone's coming tonight, she whispered. Emily nodded. Just then, headlights appeared in the distant trees, not one, but several. Engines rumbled, tires crunched. Anderson's hand flew to his radio. Dispatch, this is Sheriff Anderson. I need a location on Thomas Wilson. Static then. Last seen heading out Route 16 with several armed men. Said something about handling the situation. Anderson's jaw tightened. They're coming here. Margaret gripped his arm. You're the law. Stop them. I'll intercept them. But Margaret, those dogs need to be gone before they arrive. If Wilson sees them, nothing I say will matter. As if sensing the urgency, Shadow whined and nudged Emily's hand. The girl stood, walked calmly to the door again. She thinks she can send them away, Margaret said, barely believing the words. Anderson hesitated. Then finally, fine. But I'm going with her. First sign of danger, I'm pulling her out. Margaret nodded. Then I'm coming too. The three stepped into the chill night air. Moonlight spilled across the yard. The 7 German shepherds remained perfectly still, eyes aglow, watching the girl descend the porch. Shadow at her side, no longer a trembling stray, but a companion on a mission. Margaret and Anderson followed, nerves tight. His hand hovered near his sidearm. Easy now, he murmured, slow and steady. Emily walked without fear. When she reached the semicircle, the Alpha rose to its feet, towering over her. Margaret's breath caught. Emily, she called. That's close enough. But Emily stepped closer, raised a small hand, placed it against the Alpha's muzzle. Silence fell like snowfall. The Alpha didn't flinch. Its amber eyes locked with hers, and for a breathless second, The world held still. Then Emily lowered her hand and gestured toward the forest. A sweeping, unmistakable motion. Go, hide. The alpha tilted its head, as if weighing the command, not from instinct, but choice. Then it looked toward the distant headlights now slicing through the trees, and released a low sound, not a growl, but a rumble of understanding. One by one, the other dogs stood. The alpha lingered, gaze resting on Emily. A final beat of recognition passed between them. Then, like shadows peeling from stone, the pack disappeared into the forest, gone, as if they had never been there. Emily turned, shoulders slumped with the weight of release. She walked slowly back to the porch, and then a smile. Just the hint of it. The first since Michael died. It broke something open in Margaret's chest. Engines roared into the clearing. 3 trucks, dozen men. Headlights cut across the yard like interrogators. Anderson stepped forward, hand raised. Get back to the house, he ordered. I'll handle Wilson. Margaret scooped Emily into her arms, holding her close. The child didn't resist. Truck doors slammed. Boots hit gravel. Voices rose. Anderson Wilson bellowed. What the hell are you doing here? Margaret turned. Wilson stood in the light rifle in arms, surrounded by men with flashlights and guns. Neighbors, friends. The same people who had brought casseroles after Michael's funeral. And now they stood like an armed jury. I might ask you the same thing, Anderson replied calmly, stepping between them and the cabin. Trespassing with firearms, after dark. That's illegal, Tom. We're not trespassing. We're protecting our town from predators, Wilson snapped. Half the town's seen the dogs circling this cabin. Observing, Margaret interjected from the porch. Not attacking. Don't talk to me about science, Wilson snapped. You've lost your objectivity. These dogs, your daughter, they're connected. And not in any natural way. Murmurs of agreement rose. And then, a bark. Sharp, defiant. From behind Margaret's legs, Shadow stepped forward, tail stiff, eyes gleaming. A tiny sentinel. Wilson's gaze locked on the pup. That one of them. He was drowning, Margaret said evenly. My daughter saved him. Or lured him. Wilson snarled. One dog in the house. Then what, you gonna domesticate the whole damn pack? Tension coiled tighter. Emily pressed herself to her mother. And when Wilson said, there's something not right about her, Margaret broke. My daughter is not unnatural. She's survived grief you couldn't imagine. The yard fell still. Even the armed men looked away, some in shame, some in doubt. Then headlights flared again. A new vehicle. Dr. Crawford's Jeep. The Jeep skidded to a stop. Dr. Olivia Crawford stepped out like a force of nature, medical bag in hand, voice slicing through the tension. What's going on here? Wilson shifted. The authority she carried wasn't loud. It was carved in reputation. No one challenged Dr. Crawford in Pine Ridge. I got a call that Emily's condition worsened, she said smoothly, lying without hesitation. Now move aside. I need to see my patient. Anderson seized the moment. These gentlemen were just leaving. Wilson hesitated, anger crackling beneath his calm. This isn't over, he muttered. Those animals are still dangerous. If not to her, then to someone else. Then come back with proper warrants, Anderson said firmly, and leave your mob at home. The trucks retreated. Shadows folded into darkness. Margaret held Emily tighter. Inside the cabin, the air felt fragile, like glass, just beginning to cool after being shaped by flame. Dr. Crawford examined Emily, nodding at the girl's growing strength, but her focus kept drifting to the sketchbook. She went out to the dogs, Margaret said softly, and they left because of her. Dr. Crawford looked down at Emily, who now sat on the rug, drawing again. Shadow nestled close. The timing is remarkable, she said. The dogs appeared the moment Wilson acted, almost as if They knew Anderson finished disbelief eroding into awe. And so did she. Emily turned the sketchbook toward them. The image, the dogs on a cliff facing Wilson's men in the trees. "This is what you think will happen?" Crawford asked gently. Emily nodded. Then, another drawing the dogs crossing a high ridge, fading into wilderness too steep for men. But Emily added one more figure, a girl standing at the edge, arms outstretched. Margaret paled. "No, Emily, you're not going with them." The girl's eyes said everything. "This is what must happen." Margaret faltered. "It's too dangerous. The flood damaged Wilson." But she knew the look. Michael had worn it too just before Falcon River took him. "We need a plan," Anderson said at last. "Something that doesn't involve sending an 8-year-old into the wild alone." Crawford nodded. "Then we'll all go." Dawn crept like a pale ghost across the valley, illuminating the scars of flood and fear. The map lay on the kitchen table smeared with coffee rings and conviction. North Ridge steep, narrow, impassable by vehicle, a natural refuge. If she can lead them there, Dr. Crawford said they'll be safe. The terrain will protect them. "And if Wilson follows?" Anderson asked. "Then I'll be there, as a medical observer, documenting everything." Margaret looked toward the living room. Emily packed her small backpack in silence, shadow alert at her side. Her movements were deliberate, methodical. Like she understood, time was against them. "She shouldn't be going at all," Margaret said softly. "She's still recovering." Without her, Crawford replied, "They'll scatter, or worse, fight. And that would only prove Wilson right." Margaret closed her eyes. Michael had promised to be careful once, too. He hadn't come back. "Then I'm going with her," she said. "She doesn't leave my sight." The radio on Anderson's hip crackled. "Sheriff movement at Wilson's ranch. 6 vehicles, armed." "Copy that," Anderson said grimly. "We're on the move." Within minutes, Crawford's Jeep was loaded, high clearance, tough suspension. Emily climbed into the back shadow in her lap, her face unreadable. As they pulled away, Margaret glimpsed her daughter's reflection in the mirror. Emily was staring at their home, as if saying goodbye. The trail to North Ridge was nearly washed out. Twice they had to stop and clear branches, every second precious. Anderson's voice came over the radio. "Wilson's using the east route. 8 men. They're moving fast." At the trailhead, Emily leapt out before anyone could stop her, shadow at her side. The red of her coat flashed against the green pines, her small figure swallowed by the forest. "Emily," Margaret called, running after her. "Stay close." But the girl didn't slow. She moved with certainty, as if guided. When they reached the high ridge, the howls came long, low, haunting. Then shadows emerged from the trees. One by one, the pack returned. The alpha stepped forward, touched Emily's hand with its muzzle. Margaret stood frozen. There were no growls, no teeth, only reverence. Then a gunshot, distant, sharp. "They're coming," Margaret whispered. Emily turned, eyes wide but steady. She pointed toward the ridge. It was time, and this time she wouldn't walk alone.